Katie?
So, I know there's been a lot of attempts to kind of...
You like this question.
Yes. There's been a lot of different attempts to, kind of reform DC's education system in particular, and they've gone through like an incredible amount of like school chancellors, and I know one of the biggest, I guess most famous one was Michelle Rhee. And what do you think of her method of kind of school reform? Like, she closed a lot of schools that were failing. That upset a lot of parents. Why do you think? Do you think like her method would have worked if it had been continued, or do you think there should have been a better option?
So, great question, Katie. So, Michelle Rhee really did come in and shake up a system that for a long time had been completely, impervious to change. She went into a warehouse and found that books and supplies had been there for years, and no one had ever gone to the warehouse. In fact, it turned out she was the first superintendent who walked into the warehouse, and she found out where all the supplies were. So she did things like that sound really commonsensical, but that's not the way most superintendents have thought about it. Most superintendents, you have to back up, and this will really help you understand and help your people that are looking at this and understand your project better. Superintendents and traditional school systems really do have structures. There's a school board, there's a superintendent. The superintendent reports to the school board, normally is appointed by them. Then under the superintendent, there's lots of managers. It's like a company, right? But it's a company without a lot of accountability for outcomes. You have school systems, right? You have Montgomery County Public Schools. Whether they're doing great or not, we have schools in our backyards. Now, we happen to be fortunate. We live in an area where probably a combination of the stock the kids come from, their parents, and really intensive oversight, they're doing pretty good. But the superintendent doesn't get in his car and drive to a warehouse. He's pretty sure the people working for him are making sure supplies are getting where they're going. But in Washington, year after year, roofs weren't being taken care of. They said that there was no money for construction. Supplies weren't getting to the classroom. Books weren't getting to the classroom. So Michelle Rhee got here, and she didn't think like a superintendent because she was never in education, which was a big criticism teachers had for her. But she thought differently. So she got in a car, and went out to the warehouse one day and found this tons of rooms full of stuff that no one ever had gotten to grab to bring to schools, and it turns out it had a lot to do with purchase orders. There was a person's, remember this on the news, there was a stack of paper on a person's desk, all the things that teachers needed. They just hadn't gone through the process to make sure that it actually reached the people who needed it. So she gets in the car, she does that, she starts realizing that a lot of questions had not been answered. A lot of people hadn't answered the question, why are we opening these schools year after year? Well, that's because kids go there. Where else would they go? Well, let's find out what the enrollment is like in other schools. Oh, we have under-enrolled schools across town. Now, DC's not a huge city. It doesn't take very long to get across the city. Most kids in most areas of the country travel a lot farther than we travel in our area. So she said, well, why don't we make sure schools that don't have a lot of enrollment, aren't doing well, where there's high instances of violence. At the same time, there are federal laws mandating some of this stuff. Why don't we close them? Those were all good things. And along the way, she realized that the key, which we all know from research, is next to a family, the teacher is the most important person in a child's life. They can actually have a 2-year difference in a child's learning. 1 year with a good teacher can make 2 years of a difference, back and forth. So an ineffective teacher can set you back 2 years. So imagine a 3rd grader who arrives in DC public schools already below proficiency. 20%, 30% reading level. 1 year with an effective teacher sets that child back. 1 year with an effective one puts them ahead. So she said, we've got to do something about these contracts. There was a huge battle with the unions. They finally got something that's akin to the way we pay a lot of teachers in private schools. Based on a contract of individual performance, that's how you would get paid, that's how you get retained. And that ended up having them fire a lot of teachers. Courts reinstated some, it's still going on, but essentially the impact system is a really good thing. Now, what does it have to do with charters? When she came here, she said, if it were not for charter schools, I would not have been able to do all this. In other words, just the force of having had a city where 40% of the kids almost have left the traditional public school system, right? And a parent action to do that made her powerful. Because she could say, do you want me to have to close the whole system? Do you want to keep losing people? We better fix it or the charters will take all of our kids.
Yeah.
So that competition has often been pointed to as a reason that superintendents have been able to do things. So I think what she did was right. That needs to continue. It's a little softer now. There's a little softer, kinder, gentler person there now. But that pace of reform has to continue.